everyone, and welcome to Ibi Speaks. My name is Ibinabo Enebi. So throughout this month, we're honoring fathers and mother fathers. And by mother fathers, I mean mothers who have stepped up to play the role of fathers in their children's lives. And I hope that at the end of this series that you, my viewers, would learn from the experiences and the insights shared from my guests, and that these experiences will serve as street lights and survival kits as you journey life's road. And today's episode is about how you can become the father that your child truly needs. And to do justice to this conversation are three incredible gentlemen that I have specially handpicked because I believe that they will be able to weave and to design from their valuable experiences and diverse set of biographical tools a template on how you can become a father that your child truly needs. My first guest is Mr. Duke Ekpenyong. He is a business consultant, a public speaker, a counselor, and a mentor of young people. And he has a passion about raising young men and boys to become great fathers. And my second guest is Mr. Ibibia Iniworikabo. He's the managing director of Jemimah, Nigeria Limited, a company that provides water solutions and technologies to the Nigerian water sector since 1994. And he's a professional member of the Nigerian Water and Sanitation Association and a national director of the Full Gospel Business Fellowship International, Nigeria. And my third guest is Dr. Kweku Adedayo Tanda. He's the Chief Executive of Sports Connect Consultancy, a leading sports strategy and planning committee, a company in Nigeria. He's the immediate past executive chairman of the Lagos State Sports Commission and its governing board. And he's a seasoned sports administrator, and he has over 25 years of worldwide professional management expertise. And I'd like to thank all my viewers for taking time to join me today. And I must say that I'm both delighted and appreciative of the fact that you're here. And I just want to say a huge thank you, and thank you to my subscribers. And hey, if you're watching Ibi Speaks for the first time, and if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel. And now, when I was thinking about this topic, right, I was thinking about, okay, so who are the three men that I know that can do justice to this conversation? And I said, I'd like to have Dr. Tando, I'd like to have Mr. Duke Ekpenyong, and I'd like to have Mr. Ibibia Iniworikabo, because I have had to sit down at three different instances with you, and I knew that if you brought together your different experiences and biographical tools, that will be able to create a template that would help men to become the fathers that their children truly need. So thank you very much. But before we go into the meat of the matter, I want to ask some foundational questions. And I would like to ask, and this question is thrown open to all three of you, so you can answer one person at a time. So I would say, what was it like? What was it like being a son to your father? I mean, as young men, you were once sons and you had fathers. So what was it like? What did you like about? What were the things that you liked about the way that your father fathered you, and what were the things that you thought, when I grow up, I'm going to make some improvement on those things? Dr. Tanda, I'll start with you.
Yeah, yes, what was it like growing up with my father? I must say it was very, very exciting times for me. I was the first child, also the first first son. And my father was always made me feel that he was very proud of me. Growing up, it wasn't that kind of father that he was I won't say he was a disciplinarian, but he was firm. And I actually imbibed a lot from him. I learned a lot from him. Growing up, he was also someone that I looked up to in terms of his lifestyle, his achievements, and for me, he was a mentor, and it has shown in most of what I'm doing, even at this time, that I picked up quite a bit from him, and he showed me a lot in terms of how one should go about life, very content with himself, with whatever he had, and he was also someone that went out of his way to help someone, anyone. I mean, once you tell him you have an issue or a problem, he will take it even more seriously than you yourself. So I would say I really learned a lot from that. Like I summarized earlier, I think he's definitely my mentor.
Good. So you had a connection with him.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, very good. So Mr. Iniworikabo.
Yeah, well, I would say I had a father. I was speaking the past tense because he's late now. I had a father that had a very tremendous effect on who I have become today. Let me just start by saying that he was a civil servant, which meant he was always around in case you needed any support. He was always around. You know, those days, civil servants closed by 3:30 p.m. So by 4 o'clock, he was at home. He was one father that I noticed that almost had siesta every day, which I have never had since I grew up, because I ended up not being a civil servant, which would be one of the things I would say I didn't like about him. He was a disciplinarian, and mostly in words. I mean, mostly in actions, and not much of welding the big stick. My mom was one that welded most of the big stick. He was mostly in his words and his actions. I learned a lot from him, from what I saw from his lifestyle, the kind of values he taught us as his children, which went a long way to mold my own value system today, and whom I have turned out to be. So I would say he had a wonderful influence on me, and I think maybe my children will be in a better position to answer that, what kind of father I have turned out to be. I want to say I don't think it's been that bad, you know. So his influence was quite positive and good.
Tremendous influence. So yeah, I can see again there was a relationship and a connection.
Correct.
Yeah, and Mr. Ekpenyong.
Yes, Ibi, thank you so very much once again. I had a fantastic father who was an awesome woman. Amen.
Hey.
Apparently, I grew up not knowing my father because he passed when I was barely 2. And my younger sister was barely 6 months old. The eldest was about 5. Okay. And my parents had 4 of us. So I grew up with my mother and my 3 sisters, and my mother playing the role of both father and mother. And she obviously became my own role model. One of the things I noted when I was just pondering upon the topic of today was that you are the man. I had written something down that says, you are the man that your sons may most likely turn out to be tomorrow. You are the man that your daughters will set as the standard for men when they are looking out to settle down. Okay, but in talking today, I began to ask myself, those statements you wrote down, how true are they? Relatively true, because at a very tender age, my mother made me to realize that you are actually the man in the house. And so from a very tender age, she began to mold me with certain values. She was a disciplinarian, but seldom used the stick. Okay, so she spoke to you and believed that you should have enough reasoning to be able to understand certain things. I admit that at a very young age, some things I didn't understand, but as I grew older, some of the things that were said to me as a very little boy made a lot of sense. They helped to mold me. And I believe that I owe a great deal of who I am today, the kind of father I am to my kids. I owe a great deal to the molding of my mother.
Fantastic. Now, Pastor Duke, I want to ask you this question specifically. Now, in your profile or biography, and I know that you counsel and mentor young men, and you're passionate about raising boys to become great fathers. And this means that you're basically out in the fields and you feel the pulse of these young people. So my question is, what is the recurrent deficiencies or deficits that you find in your work, dealing with young men? And in what ways are you trying to fix them?
Okay, when you say, I'm trying to understand you very well. When you say deficiencies, with all intents and purposes, I truly believe that I have been a great father to my kids, and of course they may want to speak more on that. And I get to counsel quite a number of young people. One of the things that I get to see in the deficiencies and the gaps between those people and their own parents and their fathers is the bonding and the relationship many of the times don't exist. And it doesn't happen overnight. Okay, and it can't happen overnight. You must start from cradle to build up these things, because there is that which the child needs as a toddler. Okay, there is that which the kid needs when he is going into the teenage years. Okay, and then young adulthood. So at those different stages, there are different tactics that one needs to employ. I never went to any school to learn some of the things that we did over the years, but I believe it was just, there was also a yearning in the inside of me as a young boy growing up. I had a few gaps, in the sense that I felt the sense of the loss of a father in some instances. Okay, and so growing up, I said to myself, whatever gaps I felt, and by the help of God, my children are not going to feel any of those gaps. And we're going to be full complementary parents to our kids. So they become your friends, but understand boundaries. Even in friendships, there are boundaries. I may be your friend, but I'm still your father. Okay.
Now, Pastor Jake, we're going to get into that aspect of the conversation, because that's going to be the next. You're jumping the gun. I don't want you to jump the gun, but okay. There's something that you said that I'm like, what? And it's the gaps. What were the gaps that you felt growing up, not growing with your dad?
You know, sometimes when your mom is actually dealing with you on some issues, at the back of your mind, you're saying, you're not a man, so you wouldn't understand. Okay? If my father had been available,
okay,
perhaps it would have been handled in a different manner. Okay? So with some of those things, as a young man growing up, you know, I couldn't understand why my friends had both dad and mom, and I had only a mom. And it also, to a large extent, tried to affect even the relationship you had with God the Father, okay? In being able to answer some of these questions. You will ask questions that many of the times you don't get the answers to. And so those created a couple of gaps that you needed to deal with as you grew up to become a man yourself.
Fantastic. Now, thank you very much, Mr. Ekpenyong, for that answer. And I want to say to my viewers that if you have any questions, please feel free to leave your questions and your comments in the comment section below. If you're watching via Zoom, and if you're watching via YouTube, you can leave your questions as well in the comment section below, and I would read it out for you. And you can also send questions on the email, questions@ibispeaks.com. Now we're going to get to the meat of the matter, and I suppose the reason why we're here is to create that template on how a man can truly become the father that his child needs. And when I was thinking about this question, I was very careful in choosing this topic because I wanted to establish the fact that in this conversation, the fathers were fathers. So they provided, they were there, they provided the support, financial protection. But I was asking this question based on the backdrop that, like in most African families, traditional setups, you know, the father is that towering figure that's in the background. And so it's a one-size-fits-all kind of fathering. You know, you really don't tell him how you feel. And so when all three of you, especially Mr. Iniworikabo and Dr. Tando, talked about how their fathers were influential and were role models, I was like, oh yes, they probably would have had a less traditional kind of African fathers that were distant, those kind of fathers that a lot of people were used to in our generation. So let's hit the ball rolling, and let's judging from using your experiences as the benchmark, how can men truly become that father that the child needs? So Dr. Tando, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think the first thing and the most important thing in getting that done is to establish a connection. There has to be a connection between you and your son, okay, for you to be able to even communicate with him. And this connection, you know, sometimes we feel it's a one-way communication, but it has to be a two-way communication. A situation where you think, yes, you can talk to your son at any time, but if your son has not yet become comfortable enough to talk to you when he wants to do so, is a bit different from when he feels free to come up to you and talk to you. And I was able to have that imbibed in me with my father, that communication. We came from a home where almost in those days when we were growing up and all that, weekends, or at least, you know, we had some traditional things that we did, like maybe once a month or every other weekend, the family goes out, you know, for an evening out. Those days it used to be Federal Palace, and there were some other places like that. So communication was good at home as well. If you had any issues in school and all that, the first person or the first persons you would want to communicate with are your parents. So for you to be able to establish that communication, to establish a free to air zone, let me put it that way, there has to be a two-way communication link established. And I was able to get that in place with my son. My son and I, we talk about everything. There's nothing he feels too shy to come to talk to me about and all that. So I think that's the first thing, because the truth of the matter is that the times now are different from the times we were growing up, and there's so much going on in the world right now that if you are too distant from your son, or your son is not able to talk to you, he may end up being misled. There's so many things all over the place. There's the internet, there's peer pressure, there's so much, going on out there, and it's really, really important that you've created an atmosphere where your son can come and ask you questions, or where he feels he has issues, he can come and discuss with you. It's very, very important to have that in place.
So, Dr. Tando, you are an advocate for communication and connection.
Yes, it's the key to every other thing.
Okay. And Mr. Iniworikabo?
Yeah. Well, let me start by saying that just like Dr. Tando has said, the times when we're growing up and the times now are a whole lot of different. And one of the key areas of importance today, just like you said, is communication. During our times, I would say for me, it wasn't a direct two-way communication. I would rather call it a 1.5-way communication, because we had fathers whom you can't communicate two ways like that. You have to only be able to come halfway and allow him to come one whole way. Today, it's different. If you don't watch it well, the children are even coming 3-way, and you are coming just 1 way. So it's a completely different scenario today. But aside in the area of communication, most of the other things are still about, important as they were when we were growing up. One of the key things is availability. You have to try to make yourself available. A lot of fathers today are absentee, what I call absentee fathers. All they try to do is to provide the resources, and they believe that they've done their own part of the job. So I would say you have to be available. Like I mentioned, my father was a civil servant, so he was always available. Well, unfortunately, I am not a civil servant. I'm a businessman. So I wouldn't say I have been as available as my father was, but I had, tried as much as possible to, knowing the importance, make a way to be available as much as is needed and is necessary, and also being available in some very important situations. And then I will also say the most important thing is the value system. The value system you build, you pass on to these children, and more of the value system I would say comes from, like I told you, not much by words, because words go in and go out, more like your lifestyle, what they see you do, how they see you live your life, how they can, identify with your values, because those are the ones that have a more permanent impact on them. And you never know until you begin to have some communications with them, and they begin to mention those things to you. We saw you do things this way, that's why, don't worry, we'll continue to do it that way too. So the value system you impact into them which, as I said, should be more not much of words, but more of your actions and your lifestyle and what they see you do. Those are some of the things that today are very, very key in order for you to be impactful on the life of your sons in particular, and your children in general.
Okay, and Pastor Duke.
Very well. I had spoken about starting from infancy, starting from cradle stage to the teenage stage, the young adult stage. The other two speakers had spoken about a couple of things. Open communication, be available. Okay, the availability, it takes a lot from fathers, to say the least, because of our environment. Okay, there are certain things that are already stuck in our way, saying that the mother is to do XYZ, the father is to do XYZ. But a father that needs to be there for the children must erase such thoughts. Okay, fathers need to begin to ask themselves, how much are we involved in the PTA meetings of our children? How much are we involved in the open days of our kids? Okay, as they were in the cradle stage, how much were we involved in winning them after breastfeeding, in getting them to sleep, and I'm saying that the connection does not just happen like magic. It has to be a deliberate thing and a consistent thing. It takes commitment, it takes patience, it takes determination. Okay, how many men know how to even mix the formula for their kids when they begin to take formula? Okay, so all of these things, they build up to that relationship. And many fathers complain that the children are closer to the mothers. The children will naturally be closer to the mothers that had done all of these things from the cradle stage. And then the fathers begin to struggle in between to get their attention. And whether we like it or not, as the children grow up with both parents available, the children begin to get comfortable with discussing certain things with either the father or the mother. Okay, there are certain things one or two of my children might not want to discuss with me, but would feel more comfortable discussing that with their mother. And there are some they would discuss with me and say, please do not mention it to mommy. And it happens like that. But the joy at home is that whatever it is, we know that there is somebody that they can confide in. And in them confiding in us, we need to understand that in modeling them, okay, in modeling them, we need to avoid being judgmental under any circumstance. And that is where a lot of fathers, and as well mothers, have lost their children, because in trying to discipline, trying to correct them, they become very judgmental. Sometimes we compare the siblings, okay? And these are things that are very, very important. These are things that we must understand. Discipline the children, but discipline in love, and not out of anger, and not out of annoyance. Maybe your wife has upset you, okay, and then something just happens, the child does something very little. The next thing is that you come down with your 2 fists to break all bones because of that. And the children are sensitive. Our time is different from this time and this generation. So some things that were right, that our parents did and were right at that time, we may not necessarily be able to use the same yardsticks for the children of today. When we try that, you will end up losing them. And when you lose them, other people outside, some might be lucky to get good people, some might be unlucky to get bad people, would latch on the children, and then we will lose them forever. So these are things that I think are very, very critical. They are very important, okay? And we must take this as critical as we can.
Fantastic. Like, I really like, you know, the way that you all are just weaving your insights to create a template. And what I see here is the importance of communication and availability. But I think communication and connection is very important. Now, maybe because I'm a language scholar, right? So I want to also ask this question, because when I was thinking about this question, I was looking at it in terms of being the father that your child truly needs, which means that assuming you have 2 children or 3 children, in order for you to be that father that the child needs, you have to really know that child. So each child has different personalities. They have love languages that are different. They have, for some children, discipline, you can talk. For some children, you have to give them a timeout and stuff like that. So so the question now is, how would you know what child A needs as opposed to what child B needs? I think that's the question.
I think that the answer to that is found in some of the answers we have preferred. First of all, you need to be able to communicate with each of those children. You need to be available for them, you know, because it's only when you're available for them you know the peculiarities of the children, so that you'll be able to adapt your attention and you'll be able to adapt your attention towards their needs. So if you don't know who they are, if you don't know what they need, if you don't know how they are, some children are extroverts, some are introverts. You have some that have different likes and different traits and all that. So you need to take time to know who your child is, whether it's a boy or it's a girl. And it's only then that you'll be able to treat them and accord them the kind of attention and the kind of care they need based on their traits and based on their own peculiarities. So again, communication, availability, and taking time out to get them to reveal who they are to you. You know, we see these days certain things happen to some children, and then the parents said they never knew the child was like that. You know, and we're talking about someone that's maybe like in the 17 or 18-year range. So it means the child never really opened up who he was to those children, to those parents. And that's one of the responsibilities of us parents, fathers especially, and also mothers. In fact, it's easier for mothers to do that. But as fathers as well, you need to be able to encourage a situation where your child will reveal himself to you as a son to a father, so that you can begin to deal with whatever it is that you come across.
Mr. Iniworikabo, you think the same way as well, is it? You do?
Yeah, I do. And because in my home, we're about that's with my parents, we're 5 in number, 3 boys and 2 girls. And as way back as then, I began to notice that we were different. As close as we seem to be, and from the same parents, we were different. Our value systems were different. Our capacity to listen to our father's advice and apply it to our lives they were different. Let's talk about just the boys alone. The way we react to things, you know. I mean, basically we're all brought up in the same home, so well should be observant, and we're supposed to learn from our father, from our parents.
Yeah.
But outside, our reactions, our personalities were different, because part of what forms your personality is, you know, the values and so on you imbibe as you are growing up, lad, plus some little bit of outside influences. Now you will notice that for some of us, in-house influences had more effect on us than outside influences. While for some others, I noticed that outside influences were having more effect in who they are turning out to be than in-house. So, you know, from then I began to know that we were different. So when I started having kids, I knew that they were also going to be different. And so for you to be able to manage each situation well, you need to be very observant. Now, for you to be observant, you have to be available. Just like the previous speaker has said, you have to be available, because you can't observe from a position of absenteeism. You have to be available for you to be able to observe, because from observation you can begin to identify the differences between one child and the other, which helps you to know how to manage them in their specific situations. Generally, the value systems you are going to teach them are basically going to be the same, but you see that you know, one reacts differently as opposed to another. And so based on those reactions, you begin to notice that there are differences, and then you begin to react to those reactions. I mean, children of these days, as we have mentioned earlier, they communicate, you know, they talk to you even more than you talk to them. So you really have a lot, especially if you have the one that is not easily absorbing what you are trying to churn out there. It's not, you know, I mean, more than you are. I'm not saying that they have to be exactly like you, because they cannot be like you. So you have to also realize that. But the values they exhibit, for some, you have to spend a lot more time to explain why it has to be like this, why these kind of values will reward you and take you far. For others, they will just catch it and they will leave it. They will live that kind of lifestyle and value system. But for some, you need to do a little bit more work. But for you to be able to do that, you have to be available and you have to be very, very observant.
Fantastic. Now, this is what Dr. Tanda said. Dr. Tanda, you said that you need to give the child time to reveal themselves to you. And Mr. Iniworikabo says, in order for you to be able to be that, in order for you to be able to be the father that the child truly wants, in addition to every other thing, is to also to be observant, because that is the way then that you can actually adjust your parenting to be able to suit each or a specific child. And Mr. Ekpenyong.
Sorry, can I just say something? Sorry to Martin. I just want to connect what Mr. Ibinabo said and what I also said. There's actually a connection between revealing themselves and being observant, because the children, they reveal themselves in different ways.
Okay.
It's not by them coming to tell you, oh, I'm like this, I'm like that. No, it's in their behavior. It's in the way they react to certain situations. So if you are not observant, you may even begin to miss the signs that they have already been giving you, that this is who I am and all that. I'll give maybe an example. My son, you know, early on, we noticed, even right from when he was in school, we noticed that he liked cooking. He liked, you know, trying all sorts of food and all that. Even when he was in secondary school, he was cooking. When he was in university, you know. And then by the time he finished the courses that we thought he would be, oh, he's going to be an accountant and all that, and then he now said, look, this is actually what, now I've finished this, but I want to actually go after my passion. Now it was easy for us to identify with it because we had seen signs of it earlier on, and not insist that, no, you can't do that. Why did you waste our money to do that? Why do you now want to go and be a chef when we spend so much money and all that? But because we had been able to see some of those things. So that's why I said I wanted to mention the connection between what my brother said. That being observant is key, because they will reveal themselves to you by actions, by words, and not necessarily by coming to tell you, oh, this is who I am and all that. But you as a father, especially, or as a parent, will now have to be observant to notice those things that are beginning to determine the character of that child.
Fantastic. And Mr. Duke?
Yeah, Mr. Ibibia and Dr. Tando have said it all, really. You need to be observant. To be observant, you have to be available, okay? And you need to be able to discern your children. Typically, I'll give also one or two examples, okay? My first son, for instance, is never interested in anything parties, not interested in friends, and that he selects his friends very picky, and they are very, very few. So he went through a secondary school, and we didn't have any questions per se, But for my daughter and my last son, it was from them we learned about sleepover. It was from them we knew that they had to go out to the different shopping malls to do different things and the rest of it. Secondly, the school, when your children get to the primary 5, okay, or when they get to the senior secondary school, SS2, okay, well, we start from the primary. From primary 5, they want to get into the secondary. And the school comes and has a meeting with the parents to say, listen, it will be good for you to allow your children to mature and get to primary 6 before they go. Okay, it's a parent that understands the child that they have, that can have a meaningful discussion with the school and say, not this child of mine. Perhaps my other child, but not this one. This one has grown and is much more matured for even this class 5. So moving her to junior secondary, or moving him to junior secondary, okay, would be more beneficial to that child, because you have an understanding of the level, not just the academic intelligence of the child, but the maturity of that child. And some of these things are very easy to miss if you're not paying attention and you're not available. Okay? And so, but when you have this kind of things, you can have meaningful discussions with the schools. You can actually engage the schools well and let them understand that you may know my children to a certain extent, but I'm also very much involved in them. And that's also trying to tie in the connection between what the first two speakers had also spoken about.
Fantastic. Now, my lovely viewers, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment box, and my guests will be able to answer them for you. Now, the next question I want to ask you is a question that has been bugging me a lot. When you have a child that is exactly you, exactly like you, okay. You know those characters that your mother flogged, like all of you are saying to me, your mothers are the disciplinarians. So there are some character traits that you have inside that your mother flogged and flogged out unfortunately, because it's a trait and it's inside your blood, your child picked up those character traits or those strong will bents. So my question is, how do you effectively become a father to that child that has those your strong head behaviors and stuff like that? Because sometimes when you see yourself in your child and your child is you see yourself confronting yourself, it's always confrontation. It doesn't work.
Actually, for me, I think that is even easier to deal with because you've had the personal experience, so to speak, of being able to be like that. And then, so you can use yourself as an example when you are talking to your child. Of course, that's a child that you have established a good communication link with. That's a child that you have been available for and that would listen to you. I mean, there's no harm in saying, I've spoken to my son a couple of times. I said, look, this thing, I used to do it, but this is why I'm not doing it again. Because it is not beneficial, because it is not right, or because you can be better. And now you are coming through it. Don't make the mistakes that I made. You don't have to go through those difficult patches that I went through if you avoid doing so and so. So that's why I said for me, it's a bit easier when such things occur because you can now use your personal example, especially if your child already looks at you as a mentor. That's important, so that's when you can now, it's not every time that you come down hard. It's not every time that, yes, there once in a while that you have to apply the big stick and all that. But when it comes to things like that, I've found out that more of dialogue, more of explanations, more of using lifestyle examples. It may not even be of you, but because you are definitely more experienced, so you can even use examples of people that he may even know, to buttress the points that you are trying to make. So dialogue, patience, sometimes being firm, applying the big stick, it's a combination of both and of all that. And it's actually, at the end of the day, what you are trying to achieve is that child not going in that direction. And as a parent, it's your responsibility to guide and direct and to also warn. But also, of course, once in a while, you also have to correct. And your method of correction is important, especially if you have been able to establish a good communication link with your son. Your method of correction will be determined by the kind of relationship that you have.
Just like he has mentioned, those are character traits that created some challenges for you as a growing up lad. So those are things that when you notice them in your children, in your sons, one, you wouldn't be that surprised. It goes to show that these are truly your children. So
that's a very good point.
At least, so you don't need any more DNA to ascertain that anymore.
Yeah.
You are talking from a position of experience today, and at times it's not that easy because they believe that you are old school. So you are not. I'm talking about life experience. They believe that you are old school.
Story of my life.
But you keep on pushing. You keep on giving a lot of examples of yourself. Okay, this was what it used to be like before, but now today I know better, and because I know better and I've applied this change, these are several results it has been able to bring about. And if you do not, this is the way you are going to end up. So you have to keep sharing those experiences. Communication in this instance is very, 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 very important. It also depends on the stage of the child's life. If it's at a much younger stage, then you can apply the carrot and stick and see how that will work. If it's at a much, yes, if it's at a much later stage, then because some of those things show up at different stages, then you find out you see that you can't apply much of the stick then because at that time you are not as strong as you used to be. So you have to be very careful, you know, how you apply the stick. You know, you have to do more of communication, share experiences, let them realize that this is the way, you know, you might end up if you do not have a change in those character traits. Thank you.
Thank you. And Pastor Duke, you know what? Let me ask you this. How do you deal with that child that decides, now this one doesn't have your own character traits or anything like that. This one just decides that everything you tell me at home, I will not do. Becomes a different person from the person that you knew. I'm just taking from what Mr. Ibibia said, how, you know, sometimes you grow up in the same house and you become, all of you, you know, all the children, the same, you know, experiences, biographical tools, and they end up becoming things that are not what they were taught at home. If, God forbid, a father has to experience that, how would he bring that child back? Because a lot of parents are experiencing that. It's a real problem.
Very true, Ibi. The truth remains that there is a missing link. Yes, all the children are being brought up under the same roof. All the children are being brought up in the same way, in quote. Joseph's father in the scriptures would have thought that he brought up all his children in the same way, under the same roof, under the same love. But definitely there were differences, and the differences demonstrated and showed up with the bitterness and the hatred that the brothers showed against Joseph. And I think the most important thing was that we're not able to identify what that missing link is. It becomes also extremely difficult to handle. But the basic way and the go-to method is through relationship building and communication. Relationship building and communication. You can't erase any of this. Okay, yeah, if there was something that went wrong in between, come, let's sit down. What is the issue? Where are we here? Why is this coming up? Okay, is there someone, you know, and in between you might actually identify somebody that he's very close to or she's very close to, that you will get the person to deal with the fellow. For instance, my first son has a friend, okay, who really does not open up to anybody, but he can talk to my son. He can be with my son on the phone for 2 hours, laughing and gisting. So in discussing with his father, the father says he doesn't talk to me. You don't know what he's saying and everything. I said, fine, we'll use my son to talk to him and see if we can pull out certain things. But at the same time, we need to be careful, because even at now with their relationship, that relationship is built on trust. In confidence. So even in dealing with some of those things, you need to be extremely careful. But there are various ways one can navigate this, but it has to do with trying to build relationships, you know. And I eventually identified what the fellow loved and tried to help him get some headway with what he loves. That way I was able to break in to have and build a relationship with him. Okay, so it's a tough case, but it's not a nut that cannot be cracked. And it's just a matter of asking for wisdom and direction from God and using intuition and sometimes to build around some of this.
Intuition. Fantastic. Now, I mean, it's been I've been to school today. As usual, I have all my notes, and I pray that I also apply them for myself to also be that mother that I want my child really needs. Let me see. Any questions? Now I have a question here. So the speaker spoke about values, but see what is happening in the society today. How do we balance it? Thank you.
If I can come in there.
Okay.
Seeing what is happening in society today, how do you balance it? Well, one of the challenges of society today is the problem with the family unit. That is one I believe that one of the key challenges we're having, we're seeing manifest in society today. Like I did mention at the beginning, we have today a lot of, yes, things have changed. All of us want a better lifestyle, a better standard of living, and the home front has suffered a lot. A lot of parents, I don't know how to put it in better terms, but if I may say the way I feel, are grossly irresponsible. So the family front has suffered. And so a lot of the kids have not really imbibed good values. And because they've not imbibed good values, we see the manifestation in every cadre. You go to the we went to schools, secondary schools, the kind of stories you get back at that level were things that during our time, were not things that you can easily hear about. And during our time, we didn't have this much of, how do I put it? This much of oversight, I would say, by our parents. Our parents sent you to school because they believe that before you got to that stage, they've imbibed a lot of values in you that you are going to do all right. But today, you go to schools and you see all sorts of very surprising things happen there at the secondary school level, and it continues like that. If you go to the universities, we were there, a lot of taboos, what we call taboos then. For example, when the university, when a female dates somebody outside the university, she did it in hiding when we were there, because she knows that it was not the acceptable standard. Today, it's beyond that. So now these same people come back into grow into societies. What do you expect? The foundation is faulty. The foundation is faulty, and when the foundation is faulty, I mean, what can the righteous do? If I'm not a good Bible student, but at least I can manage. So those are the challenges.
Don't worry, it's safe hands. We have pastors around you there.
Yeah. Those are the issues that we're seeing today in our society. Secondly, I will also mention that the way we have evolved is also part of the problem that is affecting the value system. I mean, if you look at our leadership today, the way it has evolved, I mean, if you look at the history, you have a lot of things to say about how the leadership has evolved. When we're in school, the never do wells who couldn't get jobs are the people who went into politics, and today they are in charge. And so example of leadership is a problem. So people don't really see good leaders to look up to. So it affects the values of society. So a lot of things have really gone wrong. And those are part of the challenges that we are seeing today in terms of the decadence in our society of today.
Yeah.
But perhaps I could also, I just want to add, just to chip in to what my brother said. I think one of the major things, one of the reasons why the moral value system seems to have collapsed is the fact that when we talk about, mentoring your child to be like you, it's not only about what you tell the child. It's actually more about what the child sees you do. That's even a greater, it creates a greater impact on that child. For example, your child knows, your son knows that, or you're a level 10 officer in work with the state government, and knows that the salary of a level 10 officer is, say, 100,000. And then you now begin to live a lifestyle of someone with #1 million per month or something like that. So what do you want to tell that child in terms of moral values, about integrity, about honesty? When he says, look, my father is giving me the good life, that means there's something he's doing that is outside of what he's telling me. And then they begin to seek from other sources what those things are and begin to get involved in doing things the wrong way. A lot of what is happening in society now is because we just talk. When I say we, I'm talking about the adults. We talk, but our lifestyles do not actually show that we ourselves are living those right values.
And I suppose also a lot of our children are internet savvy. The kind of things, information that our children have access to is unbelievable.
Yeah, so there's
a 3-year-old child would say, well, I'm going to ask Siri.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what? I didn't hear that.
I'm going to ask
Siri.
Pastor Duke doesn't know what Siri is. Tell Duke what Siri is.
or a child before. Look, listen, I have 4 children. So the first 3 are older. So at least when I had them, I was a little bit, I knew how far. Although now, in terms of technology, we were all going into the technology thing. And I was also upgrading as they were growing. But I have a smallie. And sometimes before she has a conversation with me, she may have researched the topic. And as she's having a conversation with you, she has points that she's giving you. So I think that a lot of us parents, in order for us to match modern day parenting, should be abreast with what's happening around us.
Yeah, but that's very well said. However, we need to, yes, in society we see the decadence, but yes, also in this same society we see children who have come out upright and who have held their heads up. And it goes back to the family, family. Okay? The internet on itself is not a bad thing. Okay? Yeah. But one of the mistakes that a lot of us made, okay, was simply the fact that no, block the children, try and censor them, try and do this. A different approach would have been getting them to understand what the benefits of the social media could be and what the downsides of using the social media could be. Let them know that there is absolutely nothing to hide. We keep hiding and thinking that we are protecting them or preventing them from certain things. But you'll be amazed as to the wisdom that these children have, And after you have spoken to them, thinking that you've gotten ahead of them, they will laugh at you at your back and say, does mommy think she's talking to babies? Okay, or does daddy think that they're talking to babies? So it's important that you have those kinds of discussions with your children as they are growing up. And again, understanding the levels of maturity of these kids that we keep calling kids, but really, truly, are much, much more intelligent than we give them credit for. So once you're open to them and they can trust you and believe in you, the truth is that they will always come to you for their backup and say, this is what I want to do.
Yeah. I think that for me, right, as you're speaking, I think that sometimes the mistake that we make, and I think I also make that mistake, right, that you look at your children 24, 25, 23, and you still look at them as those little children in primary, in nursery school, you know? And sometimes we do not allow ourselves to think that, oh, this person is now a grown-up person. And I think that, you know, I had a guest one time that spoke about how it's important for us parents to begin to look at our children as adults, so that we begin to have conversations with them, that they are real human beings, and then we begin to understand them, understand the way they think, understand the way they feel, and then accord them those graces and those respects. Somebody said something here and in YouTube. She said here that even the school is trying to teach strange values to our kids. So if you're in the West, for example, you're also bombarded with, you know, some kind of things that are strange to our culture. And I think also that from what I've learned from you today, the value of family is very important. I think for me, everything I'm getting from you is the importance of going back to those blocks, those blocks, you know. And somebody says something here, says, when do you allow your children to have their way, even when you have had you say different from what? Let me read it. When do you allow your children to have their way, even when you have had to say something different? Okay, can you read it? Because I can read it.
It says, when do you allow your children to have their way, even when you have had your say different from what they want to do?
Okay, that's a very good question.
I think again, it has to do with, first and foremost, the age of the child. Okay, at certain ages, there's a need to put down your foot because you're still extremely responsible to a large extent. At an age where the children are a little bit independent or semi-dependent on you, you may just want to let them be and let them learn by experience, because certain things you learn by experience, and they will definitely come back to tell you that, oh yes, you were right, I should have listened to you. Okay, but it's good that they learn certain things by experience, especially things that are not going to be extremely detrimental to both their health and their life. And those are my own thoughts, that at what stage is this happening? At younger ages, you counsel them and you put your foot down and say, no, you can't do it and you can't do it. Okay, at older ages, you allow them to learn by experience.
Yeah, I also want to agree with what Pastor Duke has said, but I just want to say I don't think it has to do with the age. I think it has to do with the circumstance of that particular thing. You know, even at an older age, there are certain things you will not allow them to have their way, even though you want them to experience it. You know, so it depends on what the particular situation is. Then as a parent, you'll be able to judge whether this is where I put my foot down or where I can allow him to experience it, because I know that he will come back and say, oh, this thing didn't work out, you were right. So it's more of a circumstantial thing. It depends on the circumstances and the situations rather than the age of the child, in my view.
Okay, yeah, that's true, Dr. Kweku. But you see, when I said age, you know, I also said in a circumstance where the child is semi independent. Okay, for your children that are in universities in foreign countries, for instance, they bounce certain things off you and discuss certain things with you, just to get your intake and to get your advice. And you are saying, no, this is what you should do, and this is what I think you should do. And I say, no, Daddy, I don't think that's cool. I think this is a better way for me to go and everything. You're not there with them, okay? So you can only give them the counsel and direction that you think you could give. If it has to do with money, for instance, that they need money to do certain things that you say, no, that's not what I want to do, you can always put your foot down and say, I'm not giving you the money. Okay, but where all the circumstances and situations are totally in their own control, there's absolutely little or nothing anyone can do. And that's what I meant by saying, allow them to make their own mistakes and learn from the mistakes that they make.
But again, one thing you need to realize, by the time a child comes to you to discuss certain things with you, in more cases than not, that child wants your advice.
Mm-hmm.
If he or she was just going to go ahead and do the thing, they won't tell you. They'll just go and do it. But in more cases than not, by the time they come to tell you, this is what I saw, this is what do you think, what's your view, there is a greater chance that that child is looking for direction or looking for or either vindication or something to point him or her in the other way. So that's why I'll say it's more of the circumstance rather than the age of. But it's all good. I mean, but I think we'll look at it situation by situation to determine whether you allow them to grow or not.
Now that's a very robust and healthy debate. And listen. I really had a wonderful time having you here. I learned a lot, and I want to thank everyone who's stayed tuned who has stayed tuned to be a part of our conversation, and I know that you also have learned. And I want to say a huge thank you to Dr. Tando, Mr. Iniworikabo, Mr. Ekpenyong, and to everyone who has left a question for us. And I also want to say that I want you to join me next week for another special guest. And again, we're going to be continuing our series in honoring fathers and mother fathers. And when I mean mother fathers, I mean women who have taken up the responsibility of the fathers in the lives of their children. And any last words before we go?
For me, I will say, I will say, I will say that it's been an interesting topic, and I want to believe that the participants and those that are going to tune into it later should have been able to learn one or two things that will make us have better family units. I know that all of us talked about availability, talked about communication, and impartation of good values. I think those are the three key things that I will want us to take away from this conversation.
Fantastic. But can I just ask you a question? I know it's a bit. I know it's a conclusion, but communication. There are some times when some children are not here, so they're schooling outside of the country and all of that. So you can't have that face-to-face communication. So how would you maintain good communication? I suppose then it's to keep calling, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have modern ways.
Technology has made that easy for us. Yes.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to be sure. Yeah. And Dr. Tanda?
Yeah, I think you summed up everything that we have discussed today, the importance of communication, importance of availability, importance of being observant, and putting all that together to be there, to identify your child for who he is, and then be able to work with that child to become what God wants him to be.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Mr. Duke?
Yeah, it's of course we've highlighted this, the communication, the working with love with your children, and quicks. When your child comes to talk to you about certain things, sometimes it might not be to ask your advice. They might just be informing you as to what they want to do.
Yeah, that's why I said in more cases than not.
Okay, I love this.
But again, that establishes that there's communication, so which is a good sign.
Precisely, which is critical.
Yeah, fantastic. So guys, I just want to say thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who has stayed tuned. I don't want to call out some names and leave some other names. And so if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please subscribe. When you subscribe, you help my channel grow. And I'm going to see you again next week. And quicks, Mr. Iniworikabo, Mr. Duke, I'm going to call you. So bye, everybody. Now,
Bye.
bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much.